Whether it's student housing in Sydney or billion-dollar office blocks in New York, Asian investors have become an increasingly powerful force in the global property market. We sat down with Alistair Elliott, chairman of Knight Frank, to find out what the future holds. There's been a lot of talk about the influence of Asian investors on Western property markets. Who exactly are we talking about when we say Asian investors?
There are the established Asian investors who have been around for an awful long time. Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, of course. Then there's the ones who have entered the markets relatively recently. I would suggest Malaysia, Korea, and then the new one of greatest impact is, of course, the Chinese.
And are we talking about individuals or institutions? How does that break down?
Well, there are three sectors, and they tend to go in this order, I believe. The institutional investors tend to be the first outward bound capital from any particular region or country. You then get the developers who decide that actually their strategy should be to build on that initiative by going overseas to buy sites, and then possibly in parallel with that, but generally afterwards, you tend to get the private investors who go outside their home territory to explore buying homes and, on occasion, increasingly commercial property as well.
So, I mean, these private individuals, they've been buying houses in Knightsbridge or Vancouver, places like that. I mean, why have they been looking to the West, and where have they been looking?
They're generally looking overseas to find a second home. They've established their base, they've got their home, they've got the financial arrangements for that home sorted out. They're then looking for an alternative investment strategy, and residential property tends to be very popular. Where is a bit more challenging because it varies again from the country of origin, but it would be fair to generalise and say it's the mature economies of the world, where often there tends to be an established community again from the country of origin.
When we look at places like Vancouver, London, Sydney, there are rising concerns about property prices. Yeah. Do you think that Asian investors have fed into that, or they've merely been there at the same time?
Well, in certain instances they've contributed to it, because of course whenever anyone adds a new range of demand, the impact is generally that pricing goes up. I still think that there are significant attractions to those established economies where there is still an investment story and where the prospects are, let's call them, safe.
We've talked about a few cities. Where do you think is next in the sights of the Asian investor?
If you're buying your first second home or you're exploring a new market for the first time, I would absolutely stick to the territories you know well or you're associated with, and they are generally the mature financial cities of the world. Then you've got two other choices. You go for the recovery plays, which are those that were hit particularly hard by the global financial crisis, but are showing signs of coming back. Dubai is the standout. And then for the braver, there are the new emerging economies, whether that is on the African continent or possibly Latin America, or indeed some of the Asian markets, which are showing signs of new growth.
In the last year, we've had tapering, which has caused a small but the beginnings of a rise in borrowing costs. We've also seen the Chinese government clamp down on lavish spending. Have either of those things had any effect on the way Chinese investors interact with the global property markets?
I don't think that's specific to China or Chinese investment. I think there is a flavour around the world that money is going to get more expensive in the next decade, and I think, as has been demonstrated in the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore particularly, where governments are concerned about the heightened activity in a particular market from inbound capital, they can very effectively stem that by introducing cooling measures.
Earlier we mentioned Chinese property developers going overseas. They have an economy at home that's still growing at 7.5%. What's the appeal of looking to Europe or the US to make large investments?
Again, I don't think there's any exception for China here. I think it's just a diversification issue. It's at its very early stages. As I say, I think it's here to stay. And I think we can expect them to be very active as investors and developers around the world for a long time.
Alistair Elliott, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.